The night had started like any other for Ayan, who had stayed late at his office to finish a presentation. The city outside was unusually quiet for a Thursday, as if the air itself was holding back a secret. When he walked out of the glass building, the nearest bus had already left, and the streetlights flickered with a strange rhythm. He checked his phone and saw the battery was at 5%, just enough to book a ride home. He didn't think twice when a yellow taxi slowed down near him, its headlights dim, its windows rolled up tight. The driver leaned across the seat and unlocked the back door with a dull click. Ayan hesitated for a second because he hadn't even waved for a taxi, but the exhaustion in his shoulders convinced him to get in. The smell inside was sharp, like a mix of old leather and something metallic he couldn't place. The driver wore a cap pulled so low that Ayan couldn't see his face, only the curve of a jaw and a thin scar glistening near his ear. When Ayan gave his home address, the man didn't reply. He only nodded slowly and pulled the car into the empty road. At first, the ride seemed normal. The city lights passed by like streaks of gold and white, and Ayan allowed his eyes to drift toward the window, trying to ignore the unease building in his chest. But 10 minutes later, the driver made a turn Ayan wasn't expecting. He leaned forward and said it was the wrong route, but the driver didn't respond. His silence was deeper now, heavy like a shadow. The car picked up speed, and Ayan's pulse began to climb. He reached for his phone, but the screen went black, battery dead. Ayan cleared his throat and asked the driver again, louder this time, to take the main road. The man finally spoke, but his voice was low and rough, almost unnatural. "Shortcut," he said without looking back. The single word chilled Ayan. Something about the tone was wrong. Too calm, too controlled. He tried the door handle, but it didn't budge. The lock was down tight. That was the moment Ayan realized he wasn't heading home. He was heading somewhere the driver had planned long before the ride even started. As the streets grew unfamiliar, Ayan scanned everything around him, searching for a way out. The windows were tinted darker than legal, and the door handles were scratched, as if someone else before him had desperately tried to escape. He shifted his legs to check if there was anything he could use as a weapon, but the floor was disturbingly clean, almost intentionally empty. The driver kept muttering something under his breath, words Ayan couldn't understand but could feel, low, rhythmic, unsettling. When the taxi left the city limits, the silence outside thickened. Trees swallowed the road, and the yellow streetlights disappeared behind them. Ayan's breathing became shallow as fear crept up his spine. He asked where they were going, his voice shaking despite his efforts to stay calm. The driver didn't turn, didn't blink, didn't show even a hint of humanity. 2 days, he murmured. Just 2 days. You'll be quiet by then. Ayan felt a jolt of terror, so sharp he went numb. Ayan knew he had to act fast. He reached into his pocket and found the small metal keychain he always carried. It wasn't a weapon, but it was something. He slowly slid it between his fingers, timing his movements with the bumps of the road so the driver wouldn't notice. Every second felt stolen. Every breath felt like a countdown. His mind ran wild. Was this a kidnapping? A ransom? Or something far worse that he couldn't even imagine? The car suddenly stopped in the middle of an abandoned road, surrounded by thick forest. Ayan held his breath as the driver stepped out and opened the trunk without a word. The sound echoed unnaturally in the stillness. Ayan peered through the gap in the front seats and saw ropes, a crowbar, and a torn piece of cloth lying inside. His stomach twisted. He knew then that the man had done this before. This wasn't random. This was routine. The driver returned and opened the back door, motioning for Ayan to get out. Ayan forced a shaky smile and said he needed help because the door was stuck, buying himself precious seconds. The driver leaned closer, and that was when Ayan struck, slamming the metal keychain into the man's face with all the strength he could gather. The driver howled and stumbled backward, clutching his cheek. Ayan shoved the door open, leaped out, and ran into the woods without thinking twice. Branches whipped his face, roots caught his shoes, and every step felt like running through fire. Behind him, the driver's enraged screams echoed between the trees. Ayan didn't look back. He just pushed forward, searching for any sign of light, any hint of civilization. Minutes felt like hours as he ran, until his lungs burned and his legs trembled. When he finally found a clearing, he collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for air while listening for footsteps. The forest was silent for a moment, and Ayan allowed himself to believe he was safe. But then the sound of snapping branches approached from his left. The driver was tracking him. Somehow, he knew exactly where to search. Ayan pressed himself into the dirt, refusing to breathe. The driver walked slowly, almost calmly, dragging something behind him. Ayan could hear it scraping against the ground, a rope or maybe a metal tool. Time froze as the driver stopped only a few feet away, scanning the darkness. After several agonizing seconds, the man turned and walked deeper into the woods. Ayan remained still for minutes after the footsteps faded. When he finally dared to move, he crawled through the underbrush, careful not to break a single twig. The cold night bit into his skin, but he kept going until he reached the edge of the forest. There, beyond a ditch, he saw a narrow dirt road. Hope flickered inside him, faint but alive. Ayan limped toward the road and followed it, not knowing where it led. The moon gave just enough light to guide him. His throat was dry, and hunger gnawed at his stomach, but adrenaline kept him upright. He walked for what felt like hours until he reached an old farmhouse with a broken fence and a single lantern flickering near the porch. Desperation pushed him forward. He knocked repeatedly, praying someone would answer. An elderly man eventually opened the door, startled by Ayan's bruised face and mud-covered clothes. Ayan tried explaining what happened, but before he could finish, the old man's expression changed. His eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. He whispered the driver's name under his breath, confirming Ayan's worst fear. This driver had been terrorizing the area for years. People vanished, and no one ever found their bodies. Everyone suspected it was him, but no one had proof. The old man hurried Ayan inside and told him to stay hidden in a back room while he went to call the police. Ayan sank to the floor, shaking, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of everything he'd escaped. But before the man could reach the phone, a sound outside shattered the moment. A car engine. Ayan's blood ran cold. The taxi had found them. The old man rushed back and locked every door, his hands trembling. Ayan peeked through the window and saw the driver's silhouette standing beside the taxi, motionless, facing the house like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The driver knew Ayan was inside. He had followed him with purpose, patience, and a chilling confidence that suggested he had done this many times before and rarely failed. Hours passed with the driver circling the house, tapping on windows, scratching the walls with something sharp. Ayan and the old man sat in silence, holding their breath every time the house creaked. The night stretched endlessly. When dawn finally approached, the scratching stopped. The driver vanished without warning, leaving behind only the echo of his footsteps and the stench of dread. The police arrived shortly after sunrise, alerted by the old man's unanswered call. They searched the property and the woods, but the driver had disappeared as if swallowed by the earth. Ayan gave them every detail he remembered, from the scar on the driver's face to the objects in the trunk. The officers exchanged grim looks. They had been investigating similar disappearances for years, and now they finally had a survivor. Ayan was taken to a nearby station, given food, water, and a place to rest. But even as he sat surrounded by officers in daylight, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every creak of the building made him flinch. Every passing car made him look over his shoulder. He felt as if the driver's shadow still followed him, watching, waiting for the moment he was alone again. The police promised protection, but Ayan knew the truth. the driver wouldn't stop. Not until he finished what he had started. The thought haunted him. That night, he stayed awake in the station, staring at the door, fearing it would swing open. The memory of those 48 hours of running, hiding, and hearing the driver's whispers in the dark carved itself permanently into his mind. Days turned into weeks, and the case spread across the city. People were warned not to take unregistered taxis. Roads were patrolled. Checkpoints were set up. But the driver was never caught. His taxi never found. It was as if he had melted into the shadows he always belonged to. Ayan tried to rebuild his life, but every night, as he lay in bed, he replayed the moment he stepped into that taxi, the decision that almost cost him everything. Sometimes, late at night, Ayan swore he could still hear the driver's voice echoing in the back of his mind. 2 days, the man had said. You'll be quiet by then. And even though Ayan survived, he knew he would never truly escape that voice. It would live with him forever, a constant reminder of the nightmare he endured. The nightmare that started with a simple taxi ride and became a battle for his life. To this day, Ayan avoids every taxi he sees. He walks long distances, takes crowded buses, and always checks every corner before stepping outside. The world feels different now, sharper, darker, unpredictable, because he knows that somewhere out there, behind the wheel of an unmarked taxi on an empty road, the driver is waiting for someone else to wave him down, waiting to finish what he couldn't do in those 48 hours, waiting for a new passenger who won't be as lucky as Ayan.